What? What is this?
So slow to catch on.
Look at those monsters!
Relax, beautiful.
Hello everybody and welcome back to another field report here at Typewriter Sessions. I'm Brett and as always I'm joined by James.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. And we are here because finally we are going to discuss Resident Evil Requiem.
Woo! About time.
Yeah, well, you know, James has finished it as we said in one of our previous episodes.
Yep. And
we promised that we would give you our Requiem Retrospective.
Whoa.
So, wait is over. The moment has finally arrived, and after a couple of months, we can now discuss and put to bed all the years of speculation, the theories, rumours, all that stuff, and even some of our theories and rumours we're going to put to bed from our last.
It's exactly bang on 2 months today as of recording.
Holy shit, yeah, you're right.
It's exactly the 2 month anniversary.
Yeah, it's going to be a couple of weeks before this episode goes out, but yeah, you're right. It's exactly 2 months today.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
It's probably worth noting now before we go any further. Just to anyone, I don't know why you'd be listening to this if you haven't played Requiem yet, but this is going to be a very, very intensely spoilery chat.
Yes,
we'll be touching on pretty much every single aspect of the game, story, things that happen in it. You know, surprises and twists and turns. So if for whatever reason you haven't finished playing Requiem yet, please, do that and then return to us once you can't be spoiled anymore.
Because this is your last chance to turn back.
Yeah.
Because we are going to be getting into it pretty much straight away. So yeah, and as James said, if you haven't played it, go play it. You won't regret it. If you just hadn't had a chance to play it, we understand. James was a little behind, but so we understand life gets in the way of all this good stuff. But please come back and listen to us and tell us what you think once you've played it. If you already have, strap in, because we're going to get on it. So, generally, before we go into the finite details, did Requiem deliver?
Yes, it absolutely did. I suppose going into any sort of anticipated piece of pop culture, be it a game or a movie or something, like there are always going to be factors of things might not have panned out how you thought, or like you might have had some I really want to see this happen in this game or whatever, and it might not necessarily do the thing that you wanted it to do. But I think you'd have to be incredibly cynical gamer to have sort of made your way through Requiem and not be at the very least satisfied, if not completely in love with it.
I absolutely agree with you, but there is always a certain demographic of people who want to hate for the sake of hating. I think you get these really sort of die-hard Resident Evil fans who think that it's never been right since they moved away from third-person fixed camera angle perspectives, and this shift into the action, over-the-shoulder, free movement and everything, that it doesn't really capture that survival horror element. But I think at the end of the day, the series has to evolve, it has to move on, and it has to appeal to a new generation of gamers who are looking or expecting a certain level of game now.
And I mean at this, without wanting to put too fine a point on it, I mean the sort of fixed camera angle tank control era of Resident Evil was really it was 7 years from the first game to zero, and then it's been well over 2 decades of third person over the shoulder, or first person action now. So I think the kind of I appreciate the sort of purists still believing that is true Resident Evil, but far more of the Resident Evil franchise isn't that than is at this point. So
Yeah.
if you're, I really feel like you'd be cutting your nose off to spite your face to sort of deny where the games are at.
Well,
now.
exactly. I mean, in my heart, I truly believe that the greatest Resident Evil game that was ever made was the Resident Evil remake.
Yes, I'm inclined to agree.
But that doesn't mean to say that a game like Requiem isn't fucking incredible.
No.
And that the remakes of 2 and 3 aren't also incredible.
Yeah.
But they sort of stand alone as their own evolved version of Resident Evil. And just because I think the Resident Evil remake is the greatest Resident Evil ever made, and it has the fixed camera angles and everything else, doesn't mean that I think every Resident Evil game should be like that.
No.
So Requiem being what it is, and it having this sort of blend of Resident Evils, of horror that feels very Resident Evil 7, and then Leon's part, which feels very Resident Evil 4, 5, whatever. I think it's a great blend, you know, and they certainly did a better job of it than what they did with Resident Evil 6, where they were trying to appease to everybody.
Yeah.
And did it deliver? I think it did deliver. I think it was a little bit of, I think it called back to previous Resident Evils. It created its own thing as well. I think what they did to bring in the revisit of Raccoon City was very tastefully done.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it was. I never felt like at any point it was shoehorned. Really, don't get me wrong. I think there were parts that did maybe feel minorly shoehorned, but I think overall the revisit to Raccoon City wasn't. I don't really feel like it was ham-fisted in.
No, I don't think so. I think it was. I mean, they made it integral to the entire plot of the story, which is the important factor. I think if it had have just been a like a fetch quest where like, oh, there's this one thing we need, but it's in the ruins of Raccoon City, like that might have felt a bit tacked on. But they really built the story around the legacy of Raccoon City with the the Raccoon City syndrome and the sort of all of the survivors of the initial incident now having this this sort of like ticking clock on their
this late onset T virus syndrome that they've got, and I thought that was a nice little twist. I thought that was quite clever. It's just like the fact that they were there, and they were bitten or whatever, in their various outings, doing whatever they were doing, or even the fact that it was potentially just airborne or whatever, that they've had this late onset exposure to the T virus, and it's different, it's slow, and I thought it was another great way of thinking about it. Overall, I thought it was a great game. I can't really say I had much bad to say about it, and I don't even think I'm being biased, because just as a Resident Evil fan, if I've got something bad to say about a Resident Evil game, I'll say it. Just wait until we get onto an episode about Resident Evil 6. I don't think I'll have much good to say about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I thought it was great, and it really did feel like not only was it a reflection of what had been, but it felt like a genuine, true continuation of it as well.
Absolutely, yeah. It was, in I think a lot of people assumed going into it that, especially because it was launching on this sort of big anniversary, that we were going to get a sort of a Resident Evil greatest hits, and it was that, but it was also like, it wasn't pure nostalgia bit. It was moving the world forward and creating, by the end of the game, obviously it's sort of set this entire like new status quo for the Resident Evil universe, and aside from it, it's introduced some new characters, whether or not, and this is something we'll get into a bit, whether or not there's more to do with Grace, or whether her story was quite succinct. I'm not sure yet. But the sort of wider ramifications of the game were certainly like moving the world forward. It wasn't just a It wasn't just a sort of self back-patting go around. I think, I think there was actually some sort of decent forward momentum.
I think so. Yeah, as you say, it didn't just feel like a load of Easter egg exposition.
No.
I think the only thing that felt a little bit Easter egg exposition really was Mr. X's arrival. Was that wholly necessary? It was it made for a cool boss fight, but the fact that he was there, it could have been anything, but the fact that it was a Mr. X. So, okay, after all these years, they've still got a T103 or 5 or whatever they are kicking around. Fair enough, but I'll let it go for what it was. It was fun, and then the fact that Gideon turned out to be a nemesis.
Yeah,
maybe a little bit.
Maybe, egg. And it was a very literal last minute revelation, wasn't it? It wasn't
that he just transforms into this nemesis tyrant, and I was a bit like, oh, okay, Gideon's a nemesis then. All right, fair enough. And the fact that I killed it with a hatchet when Jill needed a railgun, it's just like the power of the hatchet. But it sounds like we're hating on it a little bit, but certainly I don't. These are such minor little things.
Yeah,
in the otherwise grand scheme of it, if I focused on it, I'd really just be doing myself a disservice, I think.
Yeah, it's a game that warrants a couple of little nitpicks.
Yeah,
but I really think you'd have to be, again, a massive cynic to not have walked away from that experience and felt like this was a genuinely great video game, a great Resident Evil game.
Yeah. I agree. Some interesting statistics, if you will.
Come on.
So before we dive into the story, let's talk about how Requiem has landed commercially and critically. So in terms of raw numbers, Resident Evil Requiem has absolutely exploded out of the gate. So at the time of recording, the game had reportedly sold over 5 million copies in just 5 days. And surpassed 6 million units in under 3 weeks, making it the fastest selling Resident Evil title in the history of the franchise. So to put that into perspective, Village took around a month to reach 4.5 million copies, and 7 took over a year to reach 5 million.
Wow. So that's a big leap forward in
terms of performance.
Yeah, definitely.
Even compared to the Resident Evil 4 remake, which had an incredible launch, Requiem's sustained momentum is on another level entirely. And what's even more impressive is that it's already climbed into the top 10 best-selling Resident Evil games of all time within weeks.
It's brilliant. I mean, comparing it especially to sort of Biohazard, I think you remember that at the point when, however well received 7 was, that was coming out after years of kind of ill will towards Resident Evil.
Yeah, I mean,
it really had 7 really had an uphill battle, and so the fact that it took it over a year to hit the sort of 5 million milestone is still very commendable. But whereas now Requiem's come out to almost a solid decade of pretty much across the board lauded, if not the only even arguable blip has been the 3 remake, and even then that's sort of a solid game, if not quite hitting the levels of 2 or 4's redos.
I think what people complained about with 3 was its length, but I think, if I remember rightly, people kind of felt that way about the original. Yeah. People complained about the original feeling kind of short and only having one protagonist, and it had a lot of replay value because of its branching paths, and a lot of people complained about the remake removing that, making it feel more linear. So I get why it gets some of the hate that it does, the remake, but I think ultimately it was still a great, fun game to play. And I think when you also put into perspective that that's probably the only, like you just said, blip in an otherwise strong run of Resident Evil games, that just makes Requiem stand out even more.
Yeah.
That it has been the success that it has been, but it's also had that fever pitch and that hype of, okay, we've had a really good strong run of Resident Evil games, and these have been remakes. What about their next big release that's really continuing like 3 decades worth of story? You know, it can only be good. Leon's back. Yeah. Everyone fucking loves Leon. So it had everything going for it, didn't it?
It really did.
And as you said, I think 7, people were always going to approach that with some element of caution.
Yeah.
Because people were like, okay, I've been stung for the last couple of Resident Evil games, where 5 was okay, probably only better if you play it with a friend, and 6 was downright awful. You know, I mean, maybe not everyone feels that way, but I certainly do. But then 7 was like, okay, people want to go back to being scared. And also, it didn't look like any other Resident Evil either, because it was first person.
It was first person. It had a completely new setting, a completely new protagonist,
completely new cast altogether.
You know, and going into that game, aside from the title splashed on the box, I mean, and you get very, very far through 7 before there's really even anything that makes it feel like it belongs to Resident Evil as at least, like, you know, story wise.
I mean, you get all the way to the end and you've got the most minorest of of connections. I mean,
so it is, you know, you can see why there was a hesitation on the audience's part. But
I agree. And you know, so these milestones that Requiem's hit, you know, it had a lot of things working in its favour, not just the fact that it looked like an incredible game, but, you know, it had already drummed up a fair amount of new followers to the series, I think, with these new modern retellings of previous games as well.
Yeah.
So, okay, so next story then. So, obviously we're not going to go into like a normal Typewriter sessions where we're going to talk about what the plot is and everything, but generally, how did you feel about the story? Did you feel like it was easy to connect its connections from 7 and 8 to 9, and then everything else that came before it as well? Or do you feel like it felt like its own contained sort of thing?
Yeah, it's good that you used connections there. That was very
yes.
It felt. I don't know. I think it sort of managed to balance it quite well in terms of it. It didn't necessarily feel like you had to have this like in-depth encyclopedic knowledge of the events of every other game. Obviously, it's like, you know, a lot of beats in the story, particularly in Leon's segments, carry more weight if you've followed the series, you know, all the way through. Although, you know, we've got a lot of handy little sort of flashback montages, especially once Leon gets to Raccoon City. But I thought generally it did quite a good job of just sort of telling a story that you can enjoy on its own, and it still mostly hangs together well and makes sense. Like a couple of little bits that I felt were a bit ambiguous or like not as clear as they could have been, but yeah, for the most part, I think it was quite a well handled.
Yeah, I do. I think you know, reading the documents as always will help paint a larger picture if you're really paying attention and you're a bit of a, you know, a Resident Evil, I won't say fanatic, but you certainly have got a good memory for some of the more obscure details. You know, but I think it did an all right job of trying to, you know, again, pardon the pun, but connect into the previous games of what came before it, and then also trying to build out that the connections, that new sort of shadowy organisation is even bigger than Umbrella. I would probably say the only thing that I was a little bit disappointed about is that this overarching villain, the man that's, you know, maybe even above Wesker in terms of this figure that really does loom over every single event of every Resident Evil, really, is Spencer, Oswald Spencer, Oswald E. Spencer. And that he has always been this, okay, he's the man that started all this.
Yeah.
He's the one that was leading the charge. Okay, he had people like Ashford in his corner and all the rest of it, and James Marcus and blah, blah, blah. But he was always the head of Umbrella, and Umbrella was always the evil organisation that started all of this. But I was a little bit sort of thing of like, yeah, but he wanted to make up for the things that he did, and he wanted to put things right. And I kind of felt like that's really just this guy, even who features in number 5, and is referenced in quite strongly in 5 with Wesker and everything, that he's there saying that he wanted to do this and he wanted to do that and he wanted to be a god. And then it's just like, yeah, but I adopted this little girl and I wanted to make things right. And I was just like, that's really taken away from the big bad baddie that's always loomed over every single Resident Evil game.
There is a bit of a pretty hard retcon.
Yeah. It'd be like the next Friday the 13th film. Jason Voorhees turns out to be the goodie.
Yeah,
it's kind of.
I will say though, I'm like playing through Resident Evil 5 at the moment. I'm almost at the end of it, and I've been sort of scrutinizing all of the sort of cutscenes with Spencer in, and I'm certainly not going to suggest that this was like the plan all along. I absolutely don't believe that, but I feel like the sort of the specifics of that reveal towards the end of Requiem about what Elpis really is and what its purpose actually is, it's like you can like the language he uses in his sort of cutscenes in 5, you can be like, oh, they've kind of like nothing he says there technically contradicts this notion that he secretly was like, and and there's an argument to be made that in him having this sort of like secret plan to undo all of this sort of like horror that he's wrought, he is still very much playing God.
Oh yeah.
If anything, the idea that he could be the one that, then like publicly can be like, I saved the world. Like he puts himself in an even, if he'd survived, he would have put himself in an even more powerful position than he was as the head of Umbrella. So, it's all about, how many how much can you contort your brain into like,
no, it's true,
making all of these like disparate pieces fit together to make sense. But
it's like Donald Trump creating all these problems and then solving them. Yeah. It's like, oh, I'm gonna ban TikTok, and everyone's up in arms about it. He's like, don't worry, TikTok's safe.
Yeah.
We're back on track, guys. Trump, yes, you hero. Yeah, but you caused the problem in the first place. Yeah. It's like that sort of thing, isn't it? I get what you're saying. It's almost like this thing of like, well, okay, I created bioweapons, but now I'm gonna sort of like, I want some redemption for that now. I feel bad for what I've done, and I'm gonna put it right. But then maybe that narcissistic thing of like, but I've solved all the problems now. Yeah. Look how awesome I am.
I've let the world like completely fall into disarray
for the last 30 years, probably more.
And now I'm going to undo it.
Yeah, and now I'm just gonna put it right. Oh, by the way, the fix to the problem was underground all that time.
Yeah.
And again, it's a nitpick. I'm willing to sort of like say that all good villains are able to be redeemed. When you think about like Vegeta in Dragon Ball Z,
Darth Vader.
Darth Vader is an obvious one. All these, some of the best characters start as being villains, don't they, and end up being redeemed. Yeah. So I'm willing to let it go because for the sake of the story. But I was just a little bit like, we've spent all these games being like, Spencer, you prick. And then now he's there and just like, I'm going to adopt this little girl and she's my hope. Yeah, just like, right, okay, fair enough. But we've also learned a lot more in this one about the connections, which obviously we've just been talking about, like the puns that use of that word. So the connections we're sort of trying to understand a little bit more now, although we still don't know an awful lot. It's only when you really dig deep into the documents and everything, just how much they've been, retrospectively, how much they've been involved in all of the events of Resident Evil, even infiltrating Umbrella themselves to try and gain control. And we're also understanding that this was the organisation Wesker's always affiliated with ever since he defected from Umbrella. So, yeah, I think that it will have to be an episode either of its own when we cover more lore-based type things in future episodes, much, much further down the road with Typewriter sessions. But I thought it was really interesting to see like the connections really come forward and sort of like be more present of like, okay, so this is really the organisation that's been behind most things, certainly more in the spotlight anyhow since Resident Evil 7.
Yes, because that was who.
Can't remember his name now, but the kid, the young lad. What was it? The kid in what's his fucking name? One of the bakers, but he wasn't a baker, was he?
Lucas.
That's it.
Yeah, Lucas. Yes. And it's also Mia worked for the Connections as well.
Yes.
She was sort of like Evelyn's liaison officer, basically, wasn't she? She was like tasked with protecting her.
Exactly, yeah. And then, Mother Miranda from 8 being part of the Connections.
Yeah, it's a sort of nice way that it sort of tied the sort of Ethan Winters games into the main canon again, without it being like too ham-fisted or.
Yeah, it's interesting where Rose, where her position takes place at the end, because it sort of flash forwards a number of years, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's one of those things where they've sort of, I guess they've given themselves room to figure out how. Obviously it's set. It's like 16 years in the future, isn't it?
Something
the
like
end
that,
of Shadows of Rose. So there's it's still a good amount of time, even between the end of Requiem and those events, for them to decide how they're gonna.
Yeah, how they'll eventually sort of catch up with
one
another.
I know we're going off on a bit of a tangent, but I mean, technically speaking, the events of that DLC all happened basically in her head, didn't they?
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
Not in her head, but you know what I mean. They were inside like the sort of the shared memory of the Megamycete. So that doesn't have to play to the wider world at all. That could just be its own little thing, and they might never reference it again. Who knows?
That's it. I mean, like, unless they intend on making her character somehow of some significance again in the later games. They have that they can touch on at some point. It's a bit like sort of Sherry Birkin, isn't it? She had some real relevance and importance being Birkin's daughter, but then it never really came to fruition in any real sort of way, other than that she was just an agent. So
And they do establish at the end of Shadows of Rose that she's still working with Chris as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Bit disappointing we hadn't seen Chris, I think. But,
I was. Were you like waiting in that sort of end cutscene after you killed Gideon? You were waiting for the helmet to come off and it'd be Chris, weren't you?
I was really hoping that guy was going to come down, take off that helmet, and he's like, "Yeah, boy, it's my man Redfield."
Yeah, I had seen someone point out that like, whether it's like meant to be an Easter egg or it's just a coincidence, but it's sort of in the background of that scene. You see one of the BSAA agents. I think is it maybe the one that's like stood with Grace in the back of the ambulance, and he looks very similar to the Resident Evil 7 character model of Chris.
Oh right, okay.
But obviously that has been sort of retconned out of out of existence by
Well, yeah. I mean, it has to anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that like Leon's there having a conversation, like, oh, but where is Chris anyway? Well, I don't know. I'll see him someday.
I don't know if this is something that you've read about or picked up on. I saw someone did like a free camera. In that final cutscene, and figured out that if you actually like move the camera through the masks of all the BSA agents, they are all BOWs.
Yeah, and it's interesting that, isn't it? It's like, okay, well, is it a case of they look like BOWs because they are BOWs, or is it more because they are wearing masks, they haven't just built faces?
I mean, potentially, but then it's like, so, you know, I saw the thing and they moved the camera through the helmet, and it's like they've got the sort of like bluish skin and red eyes and stuff, and it's like, you know, obviously that is a plot point that got introduced at the end of Village as well. So it's interesting that they've built that. I mean, it could be that they've just used the character models that they built for Village,
but Chris doesn't work for the BSAA anymore, does he? He works for Neo Umbrella, doesn't he?
Yeah.
So I don't think those guys at the end are BSAA anyway, are they?
Maybe not.
But even still, though, it is a little weird that if they're going to go to the effort of making some sort of facial models, that they would be weird looking. But then at the same time, I don't know, maybe it is a case of they were just building very brief structures of faces in development to layer a mask over them.
Yeah, potentially.
Or maybe they were like, okay, yeah, let's build some faces, and then they were like, oh, you know what, this is a lot of work for considering they're going to be in the background. Put some masks on them. You know, they kind of would anyway, being Spec Ops operatives as such. So
who would we be as Resident Evil fans if we weren't dramatically over scrutinizing something that was almost certainly just like a development shortcut?
Yeah. But you know what? They might listen to this and go, you know what? That's not a bad idea. And then they'll so sometimes they hear this kind of stuff, don't they? And they start running with it. So you never know.
You never know.
But in terms of like the plot point we were just talking there about, like Grace, what did you think of Grace as a character?
I really warmed to Grace quite quickly. I thought she, in a sort of similar way to Ethan in 7, she brings like a sense of vulnerability that we haven't seen in a Resident Evil protagonist in a long time. You know, you really felt the sort of the fear, not just because we as the player were scared, but because she was so, like, they really sold how terrified she was as well. You know, she's an FBI agent, but she's a desk jockey. She's not a field agent. She's
an analyst, isn't she?
Yeah, she's, you know, very much out of her depth. She doesn't have combat training. She's not. And I know, you know, by the end of the game, she's like going wild with the Requiem, and
also it's hilarious that you've just said. Well, we've just both jointly said the kind of person she is. She's an analyst. She's a desk jockey. She has no combat training, yet they still sent her there on her own.
Yeah,
amazing.
Yeah. Well, no, because
HR nightmare.
That isn't that. There's a document that you find later on in the game that, if not like explicitly, it certainly alludes to the fact that Gideon has sort of, because that was when Gideon finally managed to track Grace down, that he sort of, him and the I guess the connections used their influence to like push the FBI into sending her on that mission solo. So I, as much as, because there was sort of very quickly after the release, there were like memes going around about like the true villain of Requiem is Grace's boss.
Yeah, gotta be, gotta be.
Like sending
honestly,
her on
if that was anywhere close to real life, he would just find himself in HR hell.
Yeah, there's no way he would still have his job.
No, they'd be like, wait there a minute, wait, sorry, can you just explain your actions? So you sent an analyst into the field, into an area, into a location where she has a personal, deep connection with, and you sent her alone, and she's had barely any field experience, and you sent her with no backup into an active crime scene. Can you just explain your actions? Yeah, you're sacked. Get out. Yeah. You're fired. There's no explanation for that.
No.
But I do think she was overall a good character, and I must admit I really enjoyed playing the part of Grace and her parts as well. I must admit, I think how they introduced her into the story when you've got such an established franchise with so many long-running characters that everyone wants to see someone come back. Everyone's looking for I'd love to see Rebecca again or whatever.
Yeah.
No one's ever said that ever, but still, but everyone wants to see someone come back, don't they? It'd be nice to see another character return. And when they add new characters, you kind of think, oh, well, why do you keep adding new characters? Because I want to see the long-running characters come back.
I want to see what my old mates are up to.
Yeah, exactly. My old buddies, pals.
But then that, I suppose, was we got to have our cake and eat it with Requiem, because they gave us, a brand new character, but a brand new character that still has deeper ties into the Resident Evil universe. But then we got our boy Mr. Kennedy back as well. So it's you still get to see a fan favorite doing their business. And
Leon's the ultimate fan favorite.
Yeah,
he is for most people, isn't he? He's like the granddaddy of returning characters, isn't he, for most people? And I think it's crazy. We talked about this in Resident Evil 2 anyway. The fact that Leon has become the face of Resident Evil.
Yeah.
When you think that the original heroes of this game were Chris and Jill.
Yeah. I think it's just. I don't even know whether it's because of Leon. I think it's just, Leon's been the protagonist in all of the big game-changing games, or most of them anyway. It's sort of,
yeah. I mean, Resident Evil
2 is still, mostly regarded as the best of the original trilogy.
Yeah.
Resident Evil 4 is considered one of the greatest video games of all time, regardless of the franchise itself. I mean, it's very it's perpetual top 10 of all time action games.
Not just Resident Evil games.
Yeah,
games
so it's
of all time.
so I think that's why Leon sort of endures in a way that maybe Chris and Claire don't, because he's been a linchpin in all of these really big important moments for Resident Evil.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? I think when you think Resident Evil 1, but then 2 was another big jump forward, and that was where Leon was introduced. That brought in a bigger audience than the first one did. And then when the series was ready to jump forward again, well, it was Leon that did that, and that brought in a whole new audience again. And it's always been a case of Leon has always been very front and center when the game franchise has taken a leap forward or pulled in a new audience and a bigger audience base.
And then even with the remakes as well, it's sort of, we've had of the sort of new generation of Resident Evil games, we've now had 3 where he's the either co-protagonist or main protagonist of. So yeah, he's
and before we move on to talking a little bit about some of the plot threads of Leon, I just finish off quickly about Grace. But I mean, I felt like I enjoyed her character, and I liked what they did with her and how they did introduce her, and ultimately the overarching part that she played in the story, that she wasn't just a random field agent, kind of like how Ethan was this random guy that was pulled into things, that she actually had some sort of deeper purpose as to why she was pulled in, and I liked that. And I also kind of I enjoyed the voice acting. I thought the voice acting was good, but let's just punch the brakes on that a second. At first, I thought it was very well portrayed, and I thought the voice actress did a very believable job of her. That scene, especially when Alyssa dies, that gave me goosebumps. When she's screaming, isn't she? Because she gets she gets stabbed, doesn't she? And she gets Alyssa, right? Yeah. Right near the start, and you get that flashback. She's screaming, and it's really, really believable. even the bit where she's kind of like having a bit of a panic attack.
Yeah.
I was just like, wow, this is fantastic performance. However, as the game went on, I actually found myself getting a little bit annoyed about Grace's voice was really starting to do my head in. And you know why? And the thing is, you might have already noticed it, but if you haven't, now that I'm going to say it, you will notice it. And I'll be surprised if it doesn't do your head in. First of all, when she's running around, she's like, oh, and it's constant, right? Drove me up the fucking wall. I was like, please just shut up. You see, like, Leon's is just sort of like that more generic huff and puff type thing that you get when you're running.
Yeah.
You know, just that the kind of noise that you would make when you're fucking running. But instead, she's going, oh. And it's I'm just like, oh my god, right? I know you're trying to highlight that you're a little bit pathetic and a little bit weak, but you're doing me head in. But the next thing, which did my head in even more than that, though, is that whenever she speaks, she goes, what do you mean? What do you want? Why are you doing this? I'm just like, right, do you actually have a stammer, or are you just trying to, again, accentuate the fact that you're scared? Because the fact that you do it every single time you open your goddamn mouth is driving me up the fucking wall. But when you play, if you do play it again, I know we was talking,
I'm sure I will.
When we were speaking earlier, before recording, you don't always get time to replay games, do you? But when you play it again, or maybe I'll even just put it on, because it's actually on my screen right now, isn't it? You'll hear it and you'll be like, oh my fucking god. It's all the time, mate. Like, I said it to Charlotte, I was just like, because she watched me play the vast majority of it, and I was like, she's driving me up the fucking wall with this shit. And she was just like, oh, what do you mean? I said, that whole thing of, what do you want? Why are you doing this? Where are we? And as soon as I said that, she couldn't unhear it. And she was like, I can't fucking listen to this silly
you've
bitch.
Ruined it for me now.
Sorry, dude. But yeah.
Because I can't, like, full disclosure, I can't say it. I know it. I mean, now you've said it, like, I obviously, like, yeah, I can immediately hear it in...
It's all the time.
But it didn't bother me. It didn't, like...
Every now and then, in the right places, would make sense. But it is practically every time she speaks. And I was like, you're overdoing it. I don't know if they were really trying to lean into this thing of her inexperience, her terror, her being afraid, her fear. But I was like, there's other ways to convey this. Just stop fucking stammering. If you've got a stammer, fine. That's cool. People have them. But I don't get the impression that this is a stammer. This just feels like it's a really forced way of trying to make us believe that you're scared. Anyway, we probably focused on the wrong thing for too long there. It was just driving me fucking mental.
That's all right. This is your forum to...
It's like counselling.
Yeah.
Resident Evil counselling. Anyway. So we were talking about Leon. Some of the things that have been picked up on since the game's been released and it's finished and everything is that Leon being married.
Yes. The very, very sly little shot of him putting a wedding ring back on his finger at the end. Yeah.
Now, did I read somewhere that one of the producers or directors had cracked and was sick of all the fan theories, and he said that he was married to Ada?
I don't know. I've not seen that. I know that like the popular, it's all of the sort of fan speculation. It's come down to it's either Ada or Claire.
Yeah. I'm gonna have a look now. But I'm pretty sure people will, once people had seen that scene, people will just like, well, you got married to Ada. And I'm pretty sure the Resident Evil Requiem, Leon S. Kennedy is confirmed to be married, evidenced by a wedding ring shown in his concept art and the game's ending, leading to widespread speculation. While Ada Wong is a leading candidate due to their history and director hinting at a place to go home to, her identity is not explicitly confirmed. However, the director Koshi Nakanishi confirmed Leon is married and stated the answer will become clear someday, but not just yet. And the candidates' fans are divided between Ada Wong due to their long-time chemistry and past romance, and Claire Redfield due to their enduring bond from Raccoon City. But I don't know. I kind of feel like it would be Ada.
Yeah, of the two, I would have said so, because they're right from the start, right from Resident Evil 2, their relationship has very much been a will they, won't they. There's sexual tension.
Yeah.
There's always been that sort of flirty element, whereas, Leon and Claire, to me, felt ironically, even though her brother is a main character in the series, it felt that their relationship was more of a sibling sort of familial relationship rather than
they'd survived something together.
Yeah.
They found each other in the worst kind of circumstances and got through it together and became good friends as a result of it. I never really felt like there was much that kept referencing Leon and Claire together, but you were always getting hints that Leon and Ada's paths kept crossing.
That's it. She's so deeply intertwined into every appearance that Leon's made.
Yeah.
That it feels more like, I mean, aside from the fact that Ada's, shady as hell and has a habit of sort of appearing and disappearing frequently, but a lot of canonical time has passed since their last appearances, so who knows.
Exactly. Maybe he finally got her to just chill the fuck out a little bit. Maybe. Who knows? Other candidates are Elena Harper from Resident Evil 6 and Honeygan. But
it doesn't have to be anyone, does it?
It could just be a new character.
It could just be anyone.
That's it. Yeah. Could be the lady who...
I also saw seeing someone suggest he could be married to Ashley.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
Nah, that'd be weird.
It would be.
That'd be really weird. And I really hope it's not, because Leon, you're better than that. Yeah. So I think another character that we need to speak about, well, there's two in fact, and they're both kind of intertwined, but first of all, mainly because of the connection to the previous games, is Zeno.
Yeah.
So I think we are led to believe that this is a cloned Albert Wesker with consciousness perhaps moved over, or just a clone with its own thoughts, memories, its own progressions since from whenever it was made or whatever. But there's documents that say that about the transferal of consciousness, which is ultimately what Spencer wanted to do as well.
That's a big thrust in the sort of in the game in terms of the sort of antagonists, what their goal is.
Yeah, what they're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like the whole, it's very strongly suggested that that's what's happening with all the when in the flashback sequence in the orphanage, and that's what they're attempting with all the little shaven-headed children is sort of they're using. Is this something? Isn't it the sort of like the blood? That's why they're collecting all of the sort of infected blood, because it's like they're using that to like transfer genetic memory.
Yeah, because they believed that the Connections believed that Spencer had found a way to transfer his consciousness into Grace. But then they cloned Grace, and they were trying to constantly unlock whatever was going on in her brain to find out how to unlock Elpis, because Spencer was the only one who knew. But then obviously that turned out to be bogus, and it was a load of rubbish.
Yeah, because this is a bit of a tangent. We'll get back to Zeno in a second, but like that was one thing that I couldn't, and I've seen other people talk about this and try and sort of make sense of it, but the girls, like the orphanage, couldn't have been clones of Grace, because Grace, that flashback takes place in 1990, whereas Grace's date of birth is like 2002 or something.
Yeah.
So Grace is only meant to be in her sort of like late 20s during the events of Requiem, so she would have had to have been like nearly 40. In fact, no, because they're not even babies, are they? Like she'd have to have been like almost Leon's age for her to have been. So I saw someone suggest it's one of the only parts of the game that I think
There's a bit of a
wasn't very well communicated. I saw someone suggest that Grace actually, I mean, she's presented as like an orphan that Spencer took on, but is she maybe just like another one of the clones? But because of this sort of change of heart that Spencer had, is Grace like he decided to just like let her
Live
grow naturally, and so she maybe was still a clone from this sort of like patient zero, whoever that was, but unlike all of the others that were subjected to all of these like horrific T-virus experiments, she was just like, she was almost like a control specimen, and that she was just like a, what happens if we just leave her to just live a life as a regular person, and that's why he opted to give her to Alyssa to just raise her as just like a normal kid.
Spencer's redemption almost is to, you know, like, I'm just gonna create this life and just let her be.
Yeah, because it'd be too much of a leap, I think, to expect that like we see all these, you know, we see the. Was it Chloe, the little girl that you play as in the flashback, and then obviously you find Emily in the Rhodes Hill Care Centre, and it's like they've got you know what I mean, they've got identical hair to Grace, and they're like it can't just be a coincidence that they just look like tiny versions of her, but that doesn't mean that she's the original. She could just be another one of them, but whereas she's just being allowed to live a real life and not be, you know.
There is definitely a bit of a loophole there, isn't it? I mean, especially because they insisted on having the lab for these girls to be produced and cloned and everything was underneath the orphanage.
Yeah.
You know, the fact that they insisted on all these things being connected to Raccoon City, because if they'd done that and it was just in another orphanage somewhere else in America, it wouldn't have been, because you could have put a timestamp on that for any time. Yeah. But the fact that they wanted it to be connected, you know, to Raccoon City, I think they've certainly put themselves in a box there in terms of a timeline, especially because they're still sticking to that timeline.
You know, as I've just done, I think sense can be made of it. I just think it's the one instance in the game where the game didn't make the sense of it. You just kind of have to interpolate. They didn't really make that until you've just said it. Then I was just like, oh right, yeah. But then I'm like, well, actually, that timeline don't make sense. No.
So until maybe when I get to that point again, I'll really try and pay attention to whereabouts I am in terms of when I am.
Yeah.
I'll see if there's anything more obvious, but I can't say that I ever noticed that before when I played it. I never was just like, when am I? You know, not so much where am I, but when am I?
Yeah.
And I never really paid attention to that before.
And I'm not to say that, you know, this isn't just a bit of an oversight. I mean, these, you know, as much attention to detail goes into these things, people still F up. I mean, look at as a sort of bit of a side example, but there was this sort of confusion a few years ago when Spider-Man: Homecoming came out, and the start of the film is set in 2012 in the like pre-credit sequence, and then it has the title card that says like 8 years later, and it's like everyone was like, well, that would put the events of this film like 3 years in the future of anything that had happened in the MCU at this point. And the producers had to like admit later on, oh, we just got the time jump wrong. It should have been like 4 years later or something, and we just these oversights can happen. Maybe they just, you know, maybe they shouldn't have put 1990, maybe they should have put 1999 or whatever.
And again, I think they probably got so focused on making sure that all of this stuff happened within Raccoon City that they were like, Oh shit, yeah, but if we do that, we're bound by a
it couldn't have
timeline
happened
because
after 98, could
the
it?
fucking bomb happens in 1998 and we can't
Yeah.
move that, because it's a fucking bomb that leveled a city. So we can't really change that. So yeah, maybe you're right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But anyway, so back to Xeno anyway.
Yeah, let's not forget Xeno.
I think that first, when you get to the end of the it's the water treatment plant, isn't it? And when you do that, where you have the final encounter with the girl.
With the girl, yeah, that's right. And the door's open, and the
door's open, and he's just sort of stood there with his cool jackets, draped over his shoulders and his cigarette.
Yeah.
We all thought it was Wesker, didn't we?
Well, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, you see the black coat first.
Yeah.
So you're like, okay, well, there's only one Matrix-loving son of a bitch in Resident Evil who wears a black coat, and then he turns around and you see the shades, but there's something a little bit different about him. He's got the blonde hair, but it's a little bit different, and he's got the white suit on, so it's almost like, okay, well, this guy is wearing an alternate colour to what Wesker wears, where Wesker's always worn black. He's always been the dark colours guy.
Yeah.
But we know he's dead, because he got shot with 2 rocket launchers to the face in a volcano, which people don't usually walk away from.
No.
But there's something, it's clearly him, the sunglasses, the everything. But then when he speaks, it's the new voice actor for Wesker, which we've heard in Resident Evil 4 Remake.
Yep.
So we know it's him.
Yeah, we also get when Leon confronts him in the RPD, and he's got the
moves.
Super fast.
Yeah, he's got the moves.
Hyper lightning speed.
Yep, that's it. So it's unequivocally Wesker.
Yeah.
But it's not Wesker.
Yeah.
And the fact that he's spoken to and addressed as a Xeno.
Yeah.
I think, could they have just called him Wesker? Well, why not? But unless there's a reason why he isn't called Wesker.
Yeah. But then also, again, spoilers, he gets killed by the end of the game. So that thread is
cut once again.
Done. Yeah. Unless we'll discover later on that he is but one of many.
I think that's potentially what's going to happen. It's another one of those where we were just talking about how people want to see their favourites come back.
Yeah.
Everyone always wants to see their favourites come back. And I think this is going to be one of those where, because people have now become accustomed to Wesker being the villain of Resident Evil. I was talking earlier about Spencer being the overshadowing villain of Resident Evil. Well, equal to that is Wesker. Wesker's
Wesker's the Darth Vader to
to the Palpatine
Emperor.
Yeah, exactly. Palpatine's the one overshadowing everything, but
Vader's the face of evil.
Yeah. Vader's the fist and the face, isn't he? And Wesker's the same, isn't he? He's the one in the middle of it all who everyone's terrified of. He's the one who's sort of driving things forward, and he's the face of the villainy of Resident Evil. And I think people ultimately fell in love with his character anyway, because he had the special powers, but he had the look and he had the arrogance, and people like a good villain, and Wesker is a good villain. So I think people have always been sort of like, well, who's going to replace Wesker as this villain? And they brought him back, essentially, but then they've killed him off no quicker than he was brought back. And people are, oh, fucking hell, we got him back. We got him back at last, and you've killed him. But, I know I certainly was. But then it does make me think, okay, well, if they brought him back once, they can do it again.
Yeah.
And Xeno sounds like a fucking code name anyway. It's not even a real name, is it? So It makes me think, okay, well, there's a very real chance we could see him again. I thought it was quite interesting, though, that he seemed to be suffering from the onset T-virus.
Yeah.
Considering he's got these superior genes that he's got anyway, that he still can't resist the late onset T-virus syndrome.
Yeah. It is interesting, because then it's like as if he is a clone, it's like has the clone has inherited everything, all of the sort of super special badass powers, but also the fact that Wesker was there, he was there at ground zero.
It's a strange one. I mean, I'm guessing that black thing that's growing up his face, because it sort of intensifies when he uses his powers, doesn't it? So I'm kind of thinking, well, my thinking of it was, well, if it's not Ouroboros, well, it can't be Ouroboros because it did more than that when he exposed himself to it in Resident Evil 5. But I was thinking, well, it's sort of intensifying because using these powers makes it grow. You know, it looks worse than it is, but it's just a theory of mine. I didn't really. I mean, it's irrelevant now anyway because he's fucking dead. But it does make you wonder then what's next if they are going to bring him back again with another clone.
Yeah.
What's going to be the next thing there? But yeah, I don't know about that. I really liked it because it was another one of those where, well, how do we bring back all of these other elements of past Resident Evils if we're going to do a true full circle moment of Resident Evil? We can't really do it without Wesker, but Wesker's fucking dead.
Yeah.
So okay, well, we'll bring back this clone and everything. And it's clearly him. I mean, you know, because Gideon even says you're an imitation.
Yep.
You know, he calls him an imitation, doesn't he? So it's like, yeah, you're an imitation of Wesker.
I appreciated how they left that up to us, though. They didn't for once. You know, Resident Evil's never really been known for subtlety, but we didn't have that moment of like ham-headed exposition, or like we didn't find a diary that like explicitly beat us over the head with I've done it, I've cloned Wesker. Do you know what I mean? Like you could imagine picking that document, but they didn't. They just were like, look, we know you know.
Yeah.
That's it. That's enough.
My only nitpick of it myself is that given how high value a target Albert Wesker was and probably still is, the fact that Leon doesn't recognise him, don't know who he is.
No.
And I'd like to think that during...
I suppose Leon's never...
No,
personally dealt with him.
They've never come face to face, but you'd like to think that in some kind of debriefings and it, because he knows who Wesker is.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, in Resident Evil 4, he goes, "Oh, so it's true." He says it to Ada. He says, "So it's true then that you're working with Wesker."
Yeah.
So he knows who Wesker is,
yeah.
And probably through some sort of like debriefing and everything, they know that he's still a risk. He's still a threat after the Rockfort Island. So it's like, okay, well, I know what Albert Wesker looks like. I know who Wesker is. But then also, not just that, even if we're just going to suspend the fact that Leon is going to forget who Wesker is and what he looks like, Sherry says, "Oh yeah, I've run his face in the database and everything and nothing's coming up." Unless all of that information's been scrubbed, Wesker's image and everything has just been completely scrubbed from every database, BSAA, DSO, everything. No one knows who he is. Leon doesn't recognise him or anything. And this guy is like a really important player within Resident Evil. And okay, maybe he's been dead for a number of years now in the timeline of Resident Evil, but it just kind of feels a little bit strange that Leon won't be like, it's impossible, but he looks like Albert Wesker.
Yeah.
But again, it's another one of those where I can just, I don't dig too deep into it. I don't like, oh, this is taking me out of it. This is ridiculous. I just kind of look at it and I think, kind of feel like Leon would know who he is.
Yeah.
But
that's the kind of detail that like you can scrutinize a little bit after the fact, but in the course of the game, it doesn't impair your enjoyment. It doesn't take you out of it.
No, exactly. It's not like while I was playing it, I paused it and went, hang on a minute, you're expecting me to believe? It certainly wasn't like that at all. No. But it was just kind of afterwards when I was just like, I kind of feel like Leon would know who Wesker is. Yeah. And the fact that like he displays his power like he does and everything, that would be enough for like Leon to go, hang on a minute, I've never met the cunt, but Chris has told me all about this guy. He's wearing shades, he's got blonde hair, and he's moving around like some sort of, like the Flash. He's just like, you telling me you don't know who he is? Anyway, minor thing. But I thought it was really cool that they brought him back either way. And, everything still marries up with the original Wesker, that he's still got these... Well, their ideological ideals line up, don't they? And they're still obsessed with achieving or attaining genetic superiority. And they've still got that belief in creating their own evolution of humanity.
I mean, because he obviously we find out at the end that like him and Gideon have completely misunderstood what Elpis is, but like when he thinks he knows what it is, like he doesn't hesitate for a second
to just fucking yam it in
straight into his neck. Like there's no messing about. He's like, watch me.
Yeah. And that's it. I mean, like, and Grace even kind of like tries to warn him. He's like, I don't think you know what else
it's not what you think it is.
Yeah, that's it. And he still doesn't hesitate. He's just like, shut the fuck up, woman. And then he'll like, bang, and then he just yams it in, doesn't he? There's no hesitation. But yeah, I think it's interesting, the idea that, like, so was Zeno a planned successor to Wesker? Was it always planned to be this way, or is it just a case of like, you know, and the reason I think was he planned is because Zeno's working with or in the connections. So did Wesker always have, you know, we always know he's the kind of person who's 2-3 steps ahead of everybody else. Did he always expect or account for the fact that he may perish?
Yeah.
And he have a backup? That he has someone else running things for him if he were to die or whatever. So I don't know. It's an interesting concept, and I really hope it's not another one of those threads that they just leave. I think it's got legs, really, that they could carry on walking with that. So fingers crossed that we'll get something a little bit more out of that. So, but other than that, I think, yeah, I felt like the game overall, in terms of how it played, you know, was a great culmination of everything that came before it. I thought it was like they combined all the best elements of all of those games. You know, the remakes, the 7 and 8 outings. I guess now really the only possible question we have is what's next, not just for Resident Evil, but what's next for Requiem, because undoubtedly we should expect to see some sort of DLC, I would expect.
Yeah, well, we know it's coming. The game director did that little announcement anyway. So there's a new game mode coming, and rumours suggest sooner rather than later, like probably in the next like couple of months.
That's probably going to be Mercenaries, I reckon.
I mean, there was a sort of leak the other day where someone had data mined it and found this like it was just some music files that aren't that are like hidden in the code, and it's all this sort of quite action packed sort of sinister but like bombastic music, and people are like, I read definitely that for some sort of like action forward content. So I think most informed people are expecting that a Mercenaries mode's gonna
be some sort of battle mode, isn't there? Whether it's classic Mercenaries or it's going to be one of those battle modes where you go through stage to stage.
Yeah,
I kind of feel like that would probably work better for Requiem, really, rather than just that Mercenaries arena thing. Yeah. I think I'd like to see a progressive stage battle mode similar to Code Veronica, the original Resident Evil 3. I think that'd probably work better. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see if we get that. But what about story-centered? What do you think we'll get something?
I mean, I think it's definitely coming. What it is, though, I mean, it could be all kinds of things. I mean, like I sort of mentioned earlier on, it feels like by the end of the game, it feels like Grace's story is sort of tied up quite nicely.
Yeah, I don't think we'll see a continuation of that.
And it's not like I would suggest there's any opportunity to do something like a separate ways, because there's not at any point through the story, it's not like there's another character whose point of view of the events that we, could be explored, because we see the points of view of both of the, we get Leon's side and Grace's side anyway, so it's not like there's a third party who we could...
It kind of feels like even Leon's story is wrapped up by the end of that. He's got his fix for his fucking problem with his T-virus shit. Yeah. Grace's, as you say, her story all seems nicely wrapped up. Got the mutated monster now back a normal girl. I'm going to overlook that, and she can see. That's awesome.
Yep.
We'll just whatever. But she's got like a good ending.
Yeah, I don't feel like they'd want to undo that.
No,
because I feel like by the end of the game, Grace has earned that sort of happy ending. I don't know. I'm the fact that I don't know is quite exciting, because I'm like, it could be anything. I mean, it's like, you know, is it going to be a set after the events of the main game? Is it going to be set before? Are we going to,
I wonder, and we're actually we're going to talk in a little bit about like the rumors and the theories that we spoke about in our last field report and what came to be, even some of our predictions. But we'll make a prediction now. Like if we was going to guess what it was, I'll make one at least anyway.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's going to be something to do with the sort of like after credits thing where there's those people. You see those two boots.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's like, are we going to take control of the BSAA? Someone new, about what's down there? Are they still trying to wrap up and snag whatever materials they can get? So is it going to be something else set within Ark?
Yeah, potentially.
From another unit's perspective, trying to clean up.
Yeah. Yeah, it could. Yeah, I mean that's the close. Yeah, that's sort of stinger. I've forgotten about that. Yeah, that seems like its only reason for inclusion would be to leave a sort of breadcrumb trail for what's coming next, whether that's
either
a DLC or
sequel.
the next. Yeah,
exactly. So I was thinking that I was like, well, that could be to set up a story for something much bigger further down the road. Or the only other option after that is it's to hint at what's to follow in a DLC if they are continuing to focus on things within the events of the game. I mean, it was always obvious that with Resident Evil 4, if you was ever going to do a DLC or an expansion of it like they did with the original, is that you'd get a story based on what Ada was up to, because she's the only other candidate that's there, and you to have a worthy enough perspective. But with Requiem it's hard because, as you say, everyone seems neatly wrapped up that there's nothing more to add, so you can't help but think that it's got to be from someone else's perspective. And with that at the end, I'm like,
I mean,
could it be then?
There's maybe even though it's just like a single throwaway, there is that little line in the end where Leon sort of says about like catching up on like what Chris has been up to. Maybe that's it. Maybe we get to play as Chris again, and maybe Chris is like dealing with these nefarious paramilitary guys, and we see things from Hitcher. Who knows? We'll find out.
You know what? Actually, I'm just going to ask you about that. What did you think about the whole bit where you actually have to fight soldiers?
I quite enjoyed it. It was a different. It didn't feel. I thought it was still kind of not scary, but
tense.
Yeah, it was a tense moment in the game that I think it didn't feel like it pulled me out of it.
The only thing I'll say about it is that the praise I'll give it is that the AI, like the computer generated tactics that they deploy was fucking brilliant, because the amount of times I got flanked, they knew what they were doing. They really worked. The fact that they knew how to get around you, and you didn't see them move half the time.
No.
Like you're watching around, and the next minute they're behind you. I thought that was really well done. I was like, you sneaky fuckers. But there was nothing more fun. It felt like John Wick. If you had that shotgun and you were point blank, putting them fuckers down was so satisfying.
You see, I think when I did that fight, I not that it was easy, but I think I managed to take most of them out when they first file into the room.
Through that door.
When they first file into the room, I literally just lobbed a grenade, and I think I took like 3 of them out in one fell swoop.
Nice. That's You see, like when that door opened and I saw him pour in, I was like, holy shit, what's going on?
I know, but I've seen some cool videos of people like using a liquor to take them out,
right?
Like bait in a because there's in one of the sort of cryopods in the room, there's a liquor in stasis, and you can actually like free it.
Whoa!
And I've seen people like baiting the liquor into taking these guys out.
No, all right, okay, that sounds
Yeah.
fun. Yeah, that sounds fun. I'll try that on my next playthrough.
Yeah.
then. But yeah, I thought those bits were really cool. You know, I think the fact that you only had that little bit was enough. I wouldn't have liked to have been facing soldiers for much more than that.
If it had been like a whole like level of the game, that would have been a bit much. But yeah.
But I thought it was pretty cool. And then we see Hunk.
Yeah, it is Hunk, isn't it? Like I know, like, but a lot of people are like, oh no, it's not. It doesn't say it's Hunk. It's Hunk.
It's got to be Hunk.
Because he's not wearing a helmet. It's not Hunk. Yeah.
And
whatever.
I'm pretty sure as well that the guy who voices him is the same guy as the Resident Evil 2
It
remake.
is, and there's the whole thing, like, once the fight's finished, you can check the body and you can see that he's got the Raccoon City syndrome on his hands. So it's like, it's Hunk, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, well, there you go. Undoubtedly, as soon as I saw him, I was like, holy shit. And then I was like, yeah, that's Hunk.
Yeah.
It's Hunk.
Yeah.
You know, and
they also point out that he's the only one where if you leave that area and then come back, the body's gone. The rest of them all stay where you've dropped them. But
really?
I
didn't know that.
The commander's body disappears. So it's like, yeah, he's
probably alive then.
He's somewhere.
Son of a bitch.
Yeah.
Son of a bitch. No, that's pretty cool. I like that. But yeah, I thought that was also cool that they brought him back. You know, it's again, I didn't feel like it was forced. I was like, oh my god, yeah, you know, like him turning up after all these years, you know, this is a big moment. You know, you'd want the best, and Hunk was the best, wasn't he? You know, and Umbrella's not anymore, but it don't mean that someone wouldn't recruit him if they knew him. And who better than Wesker / Zeno / the connections would scoop him up and employ him.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I thought that was really cool. Awesome. So yeah, you know what? I kind of feel like all of the main bits we've touched on. So we was just about to talk about like rumors and things like that got sort of put to bed. So
yeah. So in preparation for this chat, I went back and listened to our first field report where we talked about Requiem pre-release, and we made some, you know, not like hard and fast, but we, you know, in the course of the discussion made a few predictions, and I've got myself a little list here of things that we were like pretty on the mark with, and a few things that we missed out. So
yeah, go for it. I'm excited for this.
So the first thing that we discussed was the girl.
Yep.
And we quite correctly suggested that we didn't think she was anyone that we'd met before. You know, we sort of dismissed these sort of pre-release theories about it being Lisa Trevor or that she was Alyssa. And we were like, no, we think it's a new character. And
they were just red herrings.
We were completely right there. She was it Marie? She was the other little girl.
Yes,
wasn't she? Yeah.
I think it was called Marie, wasn't she?
Yeah. So the next one was that we correctly predicted that Alyssa was dead.
Dead.
Yeah, like dead. Like it wasn't a fake out or anything. But we also predicted that regardless of her being dead, that she would play an important part in the wider story. And I think I can set, you know, that's definitely on the money. She was important.
We're too good at this, mate. We're too good.
Yeah. One of the things that we predicted was that, you know, Raccoon City's ruins were being used for sort of testing and experimentation, you know, under the premise that it was this like irradiated waste zone so people would stay away. And we were on with that one.
It's like we wrote it, man.
Yeah.
It's like we wrote it.
Yeah, and then the next sort of thing we got right, sort of, was we've just chatted about at length, was we said, you know, we expected some sort of like Wesker return, and you know, with Xeno very much covers that ground.
I'm telling you.
Yeah.
We wrote the story.
Yeah. So the things that we were a little bit off, I think we kind of expected there to be more returning Raccoon City survivors.
Yeah.
I think we discussed about it, you know, maybe we'll see Jill again, maybe we'll see Claire again. And obviously, like, apart from Leon and Sherry, that was kind of it, really.
Yeah, it was.
And Alyssa.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it was a bit disappointing in that regard, wasn't it?
Yeah. And like, in the story that they've told, there wasn't, it's not necessarily like there were these gaping holes in the story that needed these other characters, but, it just felt like maybe a little missed opportunity to not have them. But again, we don't know what's happening with the DLC. We don't know where the next sort of mainline games are going, so who knows?
No.
We talked about, based on like the characters that we knew were returning, also some of the things that had been said in the sort of pre-release hype by the developers, that maybe there were going to be some more sort of explicit ties into the stories of Outbreak and 6, which no, it was just
true.
It was just the return, Alyssa, and the fact that the Leon that we're playing as is canonically has lived through the events of Resident Evil 6, but they didn't play into the story in any meaningful way.
True.
We did chat about maybe that Gideon was a bit of a red herring, and that we thought he might have been sort of hiding
a larger villain,
a bigger villain. And whilst maybe you could argue that, we didn't know Xeno was coming on, and we didn't know about the sort of explicit inclusion of Spencer, Gideon was basically, he was the primary villain of the game.
Yeah, and he ended up being the main villain at the end. He killed Zeno, obviously, because he got rid of his powers, didn't he?
Yeah, he's literally the first antagonist we meet, and he's the final boss, so I think
I'd agree with that. I'd agree we got that wrong.
Yeah. And another thing, and this was more just sort of like a sort of, wouldn't it be cool if, but that ended up going nowhere, was that there wasn't really any reference in-game to the events of the live-action teaser trailer.
True. Yeah, a lot of people had said they were hoping for that one, and I think we agreed, didn't we, that it would be a cool little addition.
Even if it was just an Easter egg, but no, there was nothing. It was just... that was just a scene setter rather than an indicator of any actual content in the game. But I think broadly, the things that we got right were more significant than the things that we were off the mark on.
Yeah. I think we did all right, really. Yeah. Capcom should really think about hiring us.
I'm not going to disagree with that. Before we sort of wrap up, there's a couple of things that we skipped on. We didn't really talk about the actual gameplay of it much, and I think it's probably because it's more just like a slight evolution of the same gameplay that we've had for the last, like, since 7, basically. It was little incremental updates here and there, and a couple of new elements, like the blood crafting and Leon having his little parry axe. But
and the thing is with the axe as well is that we'll come to the infected blood thing, because that was cool, to be fair, and we should talk about that. We probably have glazed over that. I think you're right. The hatchet was a new version of the knife, wasn't it? From Resident Evil 4 remake, because they introduced the whole crouching and stealth element to the game in 4 remake, and the axe was like a new sort of brutish version of the knife, wasn't it? And it was, and I did feel like the axe was cool. It's another one of those, though, wasn't it, where the amount of things you could block with the knife was ridiculous. Like, I was blocking Nemesis strikes with the axe by parrying, and I kind of felt like that was a little bit silly. But then at the same time, if you didn't have it, you wouldn't have been able to not get hit. There was things where it was like, well, if you don't have that, you're getting hit. But whatever. It was fine from a gameplay mechanic. This, suspending my belief on whether or not it could be done is absolutely irrelevant.
Can you use a tiny little axe to parry Mr. X's giant mutated claws.
Yeah, exactly. Or parry a giant vine, which could just flatten me in a second. Well, no, of course I couldn't. But it's a game, and it's a gameplay mechanic designed to help you not take damage. So I'm gonna sort of just. I mean, it's completely irrelevant. It's not even a point worth making. But I thought it was cool. I liked the hatchet, and I didn't feel like it was overdone really. The blood crafting thing I thought was really cool. You always had that classic thing of survival horror of when to use it, when not to use it. Is this a waste of the blood? The only thing I'd say, it was annoying because you didn't always find enough scrap. Yeah. But again, that is a classic element of survival horror. That's part of it. You've got to decide when to use your scrap. Do you make bullets or do you make blood? It's a classic survival horror trait of making that decision, and the difference could be life and death. And I really thought it was cool. Using it on fucking Chunk and blowing that motherfucker up was cool.
Do you know what's interesting? I played the whole of the care center not doing anything to Chunk because I just assumed that he operated the same as the girl and that you couldn't actually take him out.
Yeah.
So I just avoided him. I just crept around him and ran away from him. It didn't even occur to me that I could kill him until you do have the sort of boss fight with him, with Leon.
Yeah.
So... Well, which I understand canonically is actually there are two of them, and it's not the same guy.
Even if you kill him with grace, you'll still fight Chunk.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So
and this is it. So it's kind of that thing of like, well, there's no point in killing him.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, if you kill him, you get a lot of antique coins.
Yeah. Have you seen anyone do the thing where there's the zombie that's blindfolded and has the IV.
The ones that react to sound,
and he's carrying around like the IV drip on a stand, and you can bait him into attacking Chunk, and he one shot kills him.
Yes, kills everything with one shot. Yeah, I tried it, did my fucking head in. Yeah, so hard.
I didn't even know that. I killed that guy. I think I did him with a blood injector. Before it didn't even occur to me. I have loved in the sort of post-release seeing all these sort of watching the way that people have played it and all these sort of little tricks and hacks of like getting through certain parts of it.
That's it. I love that, and that's how I learned of that people were going, were baiting the blinded IV guy to one-shot other enemies. Yeah. And I had him take out other zombies before.
Yeah.
But it was not accidental so much as it was just environmental, I guess. And I had it happen to me, but it never occurred to me for him to take out Chunk.
No.
But when I saw that happen, I was like, I need to do that.
Yeah.
And then when I tried, it ended disastrously, and I was getting really annoyed, and I was like, it's not fucking possible! So I just gave up, and I just killed the bastard myself. So, but yeah, that was cool. That was cool, isn't it? But yeah, I thought the Chunk enemy was an interesting addition, and that was pretty cool to take him out as both Grace and with Leon. It's that challenge of making sure you can just keep sneaking up behind him and get him stabbed. But if you've got no other enemies nearby, it's really easy to do.
I mean, I've found him fairly... I had a few tense moments, but he was relatively... Because he's quite slow...
Yeah.
And easy to spot, I managed to, again, just sort of avoid him and work around him. But, going back to the blood thing, though, I really appreciated... But, didn't appreciate it in the moment because it sort of made my life harder, but I appreciated how it really did adhere to the sort of classic survival horror mechanic of being like, we'll give you enough of this resource that it's useful, but it's not your answer to everything. You can use it in these circumstances, and you can one-shot kill zombies if you stealth on them, but there'll quite often be times where it's like you've got like the hemolytic injector, and you've got 3 bodies on the floor, and you've got enough to get rid of one of them, and you're like,
which one?
Because presumably, I've not looked into this, but presumably the sort of the regeneration of the blister heads is like random.
As far as I can tell, other than some certain cases, specifically in the underground of Rhodes Hill, I think it is random.
Yeah. So like, you really are like, it is you're taking a gamble as to which ones, because you could decide to like get rid of one, melt it and pop it or whatever, but that one might never return. Exactly. So you might have just completely wasted those resources. And like you said, it's like, you need to use the blood for crafting basically everything else. So
and that was like, always the frustrating bit. It was like, well, they're all on the floor. What's the fucking point? Because none of them might come back. Yeah. But then one might.
Yeah.
And the one I pick might be the one that won't come back. Yeah. So then it's been a waste anyway.
Or all 3 could come back, and then you've got... And the blister heads were not fun.
No, because that's it. Because with Grace, with that handgun, normal handgun, they don't die easily.
No,
you need a lot of bullets. So yeah, it was really hard, really hard, and I didn't appreciate it.
Yeah. I think more than any other. And I'm not the most skilled Resident Evil player, so like I'm not one of these people that sort of like gracefully whips around corridors full of zombies without getting grabbed.
Yeah.
Like I'm very much if I have the resources, I will kill everything in my path. But in this is like one of the first instances where I played this, and I really did have to like just sort of try and avoid quite a lot of them, because they really do just like, even on, and I, full disclosure, because I've spoken before about my gaming habits and how I have to fit around family and stuff like that. So I played it on casual because I don't have the time to like bash my head against the game any longer than
and
necessary.
Face those sort of difficult situations.
But even on casual, it was like the game is not generous with resources.
No,
definitely. Even compared to like, I recently played RE4 Remake, and I did that on casual as well, and I know that's like, the Leon action showcase, but even still, like, I very rarely felt completely helpless then. I almost always had ample, even if just handgun ammo, like I always had enough to get me through a scrape, whereas definitely in all of Grace's parts of Requiem, I felt, severely
ill-equipped.
Yeah,
exactly.
At a disadvantage. So
yeah,
that just contributes to the vibe and that genuine like helplessness.
Yeah, I really felt like it was a struggle with Grace sometimes to get through all of the sections, because you never had enough bullets and you never had enough blood to just keep popping everybody and shooting everybody. Whenever you played as Leon, he was like, "Oh, thank fuck, I can just go crazy now." So it was a bit of a relief. But I've always enjoyed stealth games. So then at the same time, I did find it very rewarding sneaking around as Grace. It was just really frustrating that if you did get caught, it was really difficult to switch into an action mode because you didn't have the resources. So, but yeah, I think again, like we said earlier, I think it did that balancing act of between two different game types, the horror and then the action horror. I thought it did really, really well, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I know we talked about that in the last field report about our sort of concerns as to whether the game would feel disjointed and whether the pacing would be off. But I think if it had been a straight like one, an hour as Grace, an hour as Leon, then it might have. But I think because it's like the first half of the game is basically Grace with little punctuating points as Leon, and then it flips in the second half. You play as a massive stretch of just Leon, and then little bits of Grace. And I think it gave you enough so that you really like sank into that particular style of gameplay, and you were doing that one part of it long enough that it felt substantial, but then they gave you that little punctuation of you've had like 3 hours of creeping around terrified as Grace. Here's 15 minutes of chainsaw
madness.
action. Like
that's it.
To like break it up a little bit, and then you go back to creepy and vice versa in the second half of the game. I really I thought the pacing of it was pretty much spot on. I think
it was almost like they just gave you enough just to have a break of that constant tension, just to like, okay, you can go mad for a little bit, you can go and have a mad half hour, and then let's get back to the shit. And then obviously you get that really heavy Leon heavy second half, where it's like, okay, here's your reward for sneaking around, and you're having difficulty finding enough bullets, and you can sort of go crazy now. You're back in Raccoon City, so who better to navigate Raccoon City than Leon? So it was. I agree. I do feel like the pacing was right. Really, it couldn't have really have been any better. So I'd agree with that. 100%. So overall, would you say? I mean, obviously, we said earlier, did it deliver? Would you say for you, it was a success?
100%. Yeah. I think it was, if not always the game I expected, it was certainly like the game that I needed. It sort of delivered all of, it did give me, if not necessarily in terms of like throwing every character that I've ever loved back at me, at least in terms of like the way the game played out, it did feel like that all of the best bits of Resident Evil, put together, and not all thrown together or it wasn't everything all at once. It gave me everything I wanted, but was measured enough to give me them in nice, like segmented. I got to enjoy the big bombastic action. I got to enjoy the puzzle solving, the tense exploration. It did all of the things that Resident Evil does at its best, and it did all of it enough that I felt satisfied without sort of
I'd agree with that, because
there.
I would say it's a game that's done a really good job of like connecting eras of Resident Evil, in terms of all of the story plot elements, like you've just said there. You're talking about Spencer, Umbrella, Wesker, all of the other little bits, all like I think it did a really good job of just tying it all in together and just making it feel unified, and I think it really succeeded in making one cohesive game built on 30 years worth of greatness. I felt like it really did a good job of it. I think it's a homage to 30 years worth of fan service. But I think it worked. And if you the listeners agree or disagree even, then obviously you can just let us know. We'd love to hear if you feel the same way about Requiem. If you enjoyed it just as much as we did, if you feel like it didn't, then tell us. We'd love to know why. That's always interesting.
Please drop us a message on Instagram and argue with us, or congratulate us on our fantastically measured opinions.
Yes, and our theories that we mostly got right.
If you've got any theories about where you think the sort of post launch content's going, or the future of the franchise in general, just give us a shout.
Absolutely, we'd love to hear more about what our listeners think, and what their perspectives and point of views on what we say, or what they just think in general would be good. We can talk about it on the podcast. So so that is our field report 1.2 to be precise. So we said before about like these field reports are just going to be sort of as and when we feel they're necessary. So we might not have one for a while now until they announce something else regarding Resident Evil, or we've got some other Resident Evil related nonsense to talk about.
Yeah.
But with this one felt necessary because it was a sound off of what Resident Evil is. So yeah, I think it was pretty important that we spoke about that. So
yeah,
we don't know when the next one will be, but
yeah, imagine, if and when the sort of new game modes drop, or when the DLC gets announced, or even there'll probably be a movie trailer to chat about at some point.
Oh yeah, I suppose when that next when that movie trailer comes out, we could probably talk about that. But I suppose now we're all waiting for the next remake announcement, aren't we?
We are, and I was fairly convinced that we were going to get it sort of sooner rather than later. But I think because Requiem's made such a big splash, and because they've already sort of announced the sort of post-game content, I feel like Capcom it'd be wise for them to just ride the wave of Requiem for at least the rest of this year.
I think they're trying to pace themselves a bit, aren't they?
But I feel like, so I think when we get to the sort of Summer Game Fest, maybe that's when we'll get the DLC announcement. I think maybe the Game Awards we might get the next remake announcement.
What do you think we'll get though? What do you think the next remake is?
I think it's gonna be Code Veronica, isn't it? I think that's the sort of most widely received assumption. I mean, every day it seems I read a new rumor that every game that hasn't been remade yet, there is a rumor that it's getting a remake.
Well, the most likely candidates at this point are Zero and Code Veronica, but I do think that Code Veronica is going to be the most likely.
Yeah.
Simply because I think they'll release Zero when they've finally decided that they're going to remake the original.
Yeah.
And I think Code Veronica probably feels like the most likely, simply as well because it has Wesker's involvement in it, and obviously we've seen Xeno recently, and then we saw Wesker in the 4 remake. So I think they're probably wanting to keep that theme going. And it's also quite interesting that we're talking about Code Veronica because that is our next Typewriter session.
It is indeed.
So we'll be talking about that in our next session. Keep an eye out for that. I'm very, very much like that. That's going to be a 2-parter. It's going to be a long one, that one. There's a lot to talk about when it comes to Code Veronica, but I'm looking forward to that one. I loved that game when it first came out. Although I didn't play it on the Dreamcast, I played it on the PlayStation. But anyway, I loved it. Absolutely loved it. But yeah, very much looking forward to that. In terms of this field report, though, are you done? Do you have anything else to cover?
I don't think so. I did have a brief question, and it was more just a thought about what was your favourite part of Requiem?
Okay, yeah, I suppose that's a good question to round off on, isn't it? My favourite part? God, there were some good parts. Because now that I'm replaying it, the Grace parts just feel like they get in the way. But when I played them for the first time, though, I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Because I really loved that tense. It felt very survival horror-ish. Yeah. I was thoroughly enjoying it the first time round. Now I'm just like, right, get me to Leon now because I just want to go guns blazing. But when I first played it, I must admit I was like, this is a lot of fun. Sneaking around, trying to think what to use when. Am I making good use of my stuff? And just backtracking all the time through all the different places and everything else. You know, I mean, I can't believe that it took me as long as it did to complete it, but I just loved it. I just loved doing that classic thing of Resident Evil, of backtracking, checking my items. Have I made good use of my items? It really did give me a very nostalgic feeling of this is what Resident Evil should feel like, even though it's not in that classic Resident Evil perspective of fixed camera angles and third person and all that shiznit. But I think I would say some of my best memories of it was that original playthrough, and it was those initial Grace parts.
Yeah,
really did enjoy that.
I'd be inclined to agree. I think the whole, and it seems to be a fairly popular opinion, but yeah, the Rhodes Hill Medical sort of Care Centre it's the sort of next. I don't want to say evolution because it makes it sound like they were sort of inferior, but it follows the lineage of Spencer Mansion, RPD.
Yep. It's another
Baker Estate. Like it's that.
It's another incarnation of it, isn't it?
That sort of puzzle box. Slowly unfolding, slowly unlocking rooms.
Yeah.
It's the classic Resident Evil feel is very not just alive and well, but like it's executed so well, I think.
And they can still do it if they want to do it. If they put the minds to it, they can still give you a great feeling of a classic Resident Evil residence, a property that is just filled with puzzles, as you say, rooms that you slowly unlock and you make your way around and you start to remember where things are, rooms are, and you're working on muscle memory, and that's a really great feeling.
Yeah.
And the only other thing I'll say that I absolutely loved as well, and I still get feelings of it, is when you make it to Raccoon City, is just how much of a hybrid of Resident Evil it is with The Last of Us.
Yeah, very much so.
It really feels like that. When you're playing it, there was loads of points where I was like, man, this feels like The Last of Us. In a good way, obviously.
Yeah,
I mean, instead of clickers or whatever, or just runners, you're dealing with zombies, but in many ways they had their own little things that made them feel like hybrids of those things themselves. The fact that they reacted to sound and they knew where to find you and stuff like that, and just the fact that it's this destroyed, decayed city and places are flooded, and it all felt a little bit
going through the collapsed building.
That's it, collapsed building, and making your way through that, and traversing through environments in ways that you just otherwise wouldn't because the fucking building's on its side or whatever. The
world's raddest motorbike jump.
Oh my god, yeah. I mean, there's always a moment in every Resident Evil where you're always a bit like, oh my god, but that was certainly that, wasn't it? But again, it didn't distract from it. It was still fun. It was just that sad thing of like, well, if anyone was going to do it, it was going to be Leon, and that was cool. I enjoyed it.
I'll just briefly as well just mention in terms of like favorite moments when you first step into the RPD and that slowed down, really sparse like reinterpretation of that classic RPD lobby theme hits.
It was a very
goosebumps.
I thought the soundtrack to Resident Evil was excellent. Actually, there were so many parts where I was like, God, the music's amazing. It's so well done. And that part in particular was that thing of like where all the music's just been completely stripped down, and the only bits that have been left behind from that music is the really iconic bit that you remember. And I felt like that mirrored the setting so well. It's like, well, it's been destroyed, but there's still bits that you remember, and they're the bits that you remember first, and that music really reflected that, I felt, because you get that little ding, 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 and I was just like, and you just, the fact that they just play that every now and then, and it's just like, wow, what a great idea to just pepper that in every now and then, just to make you feel like you're back at home, sort of thing. But yeah, I thought that was a really good use of the soundtrack. And I'm a sucker for a fucking soundtrack as well. I really am. Yeah. And I felt like they did a really good job of that. I thought the soundtrack was excellent. So,
final question: Did you see Tofu?
No, I didn't, but I've seen the video. You know what? I keep walking into that room and I'm like, show yourself, you little fucker. But no, I haven't seen him because he like pops his head out from behind that beam, doesn't he?
I think there's 3 different places.
Oh, really?
It's all rooms that have like outside facing windows. I don't know if you need to do something to trigger it or you just need to sort of like hang around long enough.
Mm.
But yeah, no, I didn't see it myself either. I
Right,
just saw the videos to the point where I was like, "Is this real?" As someone,
Yeah.
But no, apparently it's very much real.
I did wonder.
I have seen some definitely not real but very hilarious PC mods.
Oh, well, they always are.
Oh my
aren't they?
god! I saw. We'll end on this. I saw one yesterday. It was the scene when Leon unlocks the storage crate for the motorbike, and it was just a toilet. Leon's just like tearing. It didn't help as well that this person had modded in Leon was in like just like a pair of like short shorts and like
Oh my god!
and like just like leather straps with his guns on and nothing else. So just like rippling shiny muscles, and then he sat in a pair of tiny shorts, riding a toilet down the freeway.
Talk about a few potholes.
God bless modders.
Yeah, they know how to have fun. Well, I think you're absolutely right. I think that's where we'll end.
Yep.
Yeah.
Leon on the toilet.
Leon on the toilet. Yeah, good place for him to end it and a good place for us. So, fantastic. Well, that is our field report for today. And as we said, next time we'll have one, I don't know when it'll be, but it's when it's relevant.
Yep.
So just keep an eye out for the next field report, whenever that will be, and we will have another typewriter session for you very, very soon. Thank you to all of our listeners. If you've got something you want to say, drop it in the comments, whether that's on Spotify or YouTube or whatever. And if you want to leave us a review as well, that would really, really help. It'd really, really appreciate really, really help the podcast if you could do that. It'd be really appreciated. And yeah, thank you to all of our listeners. We really, really do appreciate you. And until then, it's goodbye from James.
Goodbye!
And of course, it's goodbye from me. And keep those ink ribbons stocked up, and we'll catch you in the next one. See you later, everybody.
Bye!